We're back with you in the Element Wealth studio on this
Friday Eve.
Joining us now is John McKay, President, CEO of the Mississippi Manufacturers Association. John, good to see you.
Yeah, good to be here, Jared.
So, with respect to the economy right now, John, how is that affecting your members? What are they telling you about? Because we got the manufacturing index a couple of days ago.
Yep.
Yeah. And it came in below expectations. It's not terrible.
A little weaker than they had predicted, but still relatively strong, higher than negative territory. So, yeah, that was a little disappointing, but not completely discouraging. And I would say that's kind of how things are going in the state's manufacturing sector right now. It's kind of a mixed bag. You look at specific sectors, several come to mind with the impact of higher interest rates. So when home building is impacted with higher interest rates, you have other sectors like furniture manufacturing and home goods and things like that. Auto manufacturing has not taken a hit per se, but just kind of come down from the heights of post-pandemic boom. So we're seeing some of that. So it's a cooled environment, but I'd say overall doing really, really well given the general economy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good news. So what percentage of our total state's GDP does manufacturing comprise? I know agriculture is, a third, a little more than a third.
Right. I think we're about a quarter.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I thought it was pretty high.
It's really high, and one of the things that I always look at, too, is the level of employment. And it's funny, we've actually stayed relatively stable. We have all these announcements that you've heard, and you got to tip your cap to Governor Reeves and MDA Director Bill Cork. Those guys have really put a strategy in place to develop the manufacturing sector and bring in a lot of exciting developments. But overall employment has stayed relatively static. We're in the 143 to 148,000 employee range, and we've been that way for several years. But a point that I always try to make is all of this new modern manufacturing requires less people.
Yeah, sure.
It requires a lot more of the skilled talent, relying a lot more on the Industry 4.0 technologies, so robotics, mechatronics, all of these things that are deployed in modern manufacturing. And so I think that's a trend you're just going to see, and you're going to see a lot more capital investment intensive enterprises rather than employee intensive enterprises. And that's just something we as a state are going to have to recognize and look at our incentive models that we deploy in the future to try to get those new plants in here.
Last statistical data that I looked at, John, not too long ago, indicated that about 9% of our national workforce is involved in the manufacturing sector.
Yep.
So it's now below double digits.
Yep.
And for a while, it seems like it was kind of hanging around 12, 13%. Of course, that's precipitously down from what it was 40, 50, 60 years ago.
That's
and
right.
It's because of these advances in technology and these new innovations. We just need fewer people to make stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And a general economic shift to services was a major impact on that. But, you had that sort of early 90s, mid-90s shift with a lot of the free trade, NAFTA and others that came along, and really did take a lot of the lower skilled, labor-intensive jobs to cheaper countries. That's a fact. That happened. But what we were left with was really a solid core base of manufacturing, and especially in Mississippi, that I think is a higher quality prospect going forward, and we just need to grow that. And that's one of the focus that we have had for years and years and will for years to come is workforce development.
Yeah.
We have got to build our own capacity here in Mississippi with skills. We have great educational partners throughout the state, but that's going to be a thing that we work with the legislature on. Obviously, there's federal programs that we work with, but that's going to continue to be a big driver of our activities is taking the workforce we have. Unfortunately, Mississippi is not growing the way some other states are, but we've got to take what we have and grow that, attract new businesses, and then I think the population will flow from there.
So you talked about Governor Reeves and MDA Director Bill Cork. I agree. They've done a great job of attracting new industry, record-setting, honestly, in terms of the capital investment. And a fair amount of that has been new manufacturing facilities and projects. what attracts them to Mississippi? What are we selling that's getting them here?
Yeah, so and that's another thing that those guys have really been laser focused on is so when you look at site location consultants and just the companies themselves, when they're looking at expansion and building a new facility, several things jump to the top. Number one, like I said, workforce is huge.
Sure.
And so that's one thing that we do have. And especially it's in pockets, unfortunately. So, we have areas of the state that have traditionally been industrialized and heavy manufacturing. And those folks have the talent already in place. And so that's a natural attractant. The other thing is site-ready, sites in around the state. To speed to market has become the number one thing that companies look for. And so if they have a site that really doesn't take a lot of time to develop, and then there's workforce within a 30 to 50 mile radius, because people in Mississippi they'll jump in that pickup truck and drive 50 miles to a good job in no time. So those are the things that have really attracted a lot of these companies and these projects. And hats off to the leadership that they're investing in things like this site development grant program. That's I think Governor Reeves just announced 17 new grants that around the state. Phenomenal. Those are the things that help communities get to where they need to be. And you talk to Joey Deason over here in Madison, and those folks, they did it right, and they put the money in the ground on the front end, and they knew that the opportunity would arise, and it did with Amazon. Yeah,
it turned out to be a fantastic investment. I mean, admittingly, a little risky.
Yes.
When you do that, but that's the way the game's played. But it super paid off.
Well, and that's what the community and economic developers around the state. I think they're willing to take those risks. But it does take everybody. It takes everybody at that community level to understand that those investments are critical, and it might not pay off 5, 10, 15 years, but it will pay off, and you got to do it over time.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are between sessions right now. We got, of course, the 25 session will get kicked off in about 4 months and change. What's on your agenda from a manufacturing perspective?
Sure. Well, we, obviously the last session, it was long, but I think it was fruitful. We got several things done. A few things were left on the table. But, it's almost a perennial thing. I kind of laugh when I put together our agenda with the assistants. We have committees and groups that get together and work on these things. It's almost always you've got workforce, you've got transportation and infrastructure, you've got taxes, and those are all going to be on the agenda for this next year. And fortunately, you see both the House and the Senate leadership and committees really doing some work in the off season, which is not very typical. There's always a few meetings, but they're really putting effort in on the tax side and workforce development, and you're seeing those things come to light. I mean, for instance, we've been talking a lot about adjacent to the workforce issue is child care. That's a barrier to getting people off the sidelines in Mississippi to come to work, trying to figure out a way to incentivize providers or companies or all the above to help bridge that divide in the cost of child care to get folks that otherwise want to be at work and have the capacity and they're ready. They just have that barrier of the cost of child care or the infrastructure of child care in their community.
Yeah. Absolutely, and we've got Speaker of the House Jason White, who is holding a summit, a policy summit, to talk about ways to continue to trim our tax burden, sales taxes. Everything's on the table, sales taxes, income taxes. Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann, members of the Senate, members of the House, be available, be on hand. And this is available to the public as well.
Yeah, it is. And Speaker White has actually asked me to speak on a panel there. So we're still ironing out exactly what topics we're going to cover. But one of the things that in this specific space that I always like to highlight and remind policymakers of is over the last 10 years, and MMA was very focused on this, and we advocated for this. Mississippi had a pretty regressive tax structure when it came to businesses. We had things like the inventory tax, the franchise tax, tax on utilities that manufacturers use in their processes. Other states didn't have these things. And to the credit of people like Governor Reeves and Lieutenant Governor Hosemann and Jason White, and before him Speaker Gunn, they saw and recognized those were a problem. And we've done a lot to reduce or eliminate those burdens.
Yeah.
unfortunately, that just got us to parity.
Right.
We don't need to backslide on those things.
That's a good point.
And bring those back onto the books, because then we'd be fighting with ourselves.
I totally agree.
Yeah. So,
John, appreciate you coming in. Appreciate the update. I'll probably see you at the summit here in a couple of weeks.
Looking
Sounds
forward
good.
to it.
John McKay, President and CEO of the Mississippi Manufacturers Association, has been our guest. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.